Sometimes the most powerful revelations come when people are forced to confront their own assumptions. This is a story about privilege, prejudice, and a transformative moment when truth challenges deeply held biases. By the end, you'll understand why these confrontations matter and how they can transform communities when justice prevails over ignorance. They don't belong here. The words hung in the humid summer air, barely whispered yet cutting through the ambient sounds of splashing water and clinking glasses at the Pinecrest Country Club. Marion Taylor, a trim woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, leaned toward her friend Diane as she tracked the movements of the black family setting up their picnic blanket on the expansive lawn near the West Pavilion. "Someone should say something," Diane agreed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "This isn't a public park." The family in question, a man and woman who appear to be in their mid-30s, along with their 2 children, a boy around 10 and a girl about 7, seemed blissfully unaware of the growing discomfort their presence was causing among the club's regular Sunday crowd. The father spread out a colorful quilt, while the mother unpacked a wicker basket. The children, barely containing their excitement, were already eyeing the sparkling pool just yards away. James Richardson, club president for the past 8 years, was alerted to the situation by the pool attendant. As he approached Marion and Diane, his expression showed controlled concern. "Ladies," he nodded respectfully, "is there a problem?" Marion gestured discreetly toward the family. "Those people just walked in and set up over there. Did someone check their membership cards?" James frowned. Pinecrest had been established in 1954 and remained one of the most exclusive clubs in Clayton County. Its membership was largely inherited, with new applications requiring sponsorship from at least 3 existing members and approval by the board. In its nearly 70-year history, Pinecrest had admitted exactly 4 black families, all in the past decade, and all with substantial financial portfolios. "I'll handle this," James assured them before striding purposefully across the manicured lawn. The father of the family looked up as James approached, his warm smile fading slightly at the man's serious expression. "Good afternoon," the father said, standing and extending his hand. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Indeed," James replied, shaking his hand briefly. "I'm James Richardson, president of Pinecrest. I don't believe we've met. Marcus Johnson. This is my wife, Keisha, and our children, Zoe and Darius." Keisha nodded politely but remained seated, her posture subtly more guarded now. She'd seen the scenario play out before. The children sensed attention and moved closer to their mother. "Mr. Johnson," James continued, his voice professionally cordial, "I'm afraid Pinecrest is a private club. Are you guests of a member today?" The question hung in the air between them. Across the lawn, several conversations had quieted as members watched the interaction unfold. Some had the decency to appear uncomfortable with the situation. Others watched with barely concealed satisfaction. "Actually," Marcus replied evenly, his voice betraying no emotion, "we are members." James coughed slightly. "I'm sorry, I don't recall your application coming before the board. When were you approved?" Keisha Johnson finally stood, placing protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "My husband didn't apply for membership, Mr. Richardson." "I don't understand," James said, confusion evident on his face. "We didn't need to apply," Marcus explained. "We're the new owners." The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the still summer air. Even from a distance, Marion and Diane could see James's entire demeanor shift. "Owners," James repeated, as if the word itself was foreign to him. "Yes," Marcus confirmed. Johnson Investment Group finalized the purchase of Pinecrest Country Club last Tuesday. "I believe the board was notified." James's face flushed. There was a memo about new ownership, but it only mentioned a corporate entity. Not that the new owners would be black. Keisha finished for him, her voice firm but not unkind. From across the pool area, longtime member Walter Chambers approached, his curiosity piqued by the unusual confrontation. "Everything all right, James?" he asked, eyeing the Johnson family with poorly disguised suspicion. "Walter," James began, his voice strained. "This is Marcus Johnson. His company, they've purchased Pinecrest." Walter's expression cycled rapidly through disbelief, shock, and finally a forced smile as he extended his hand. Well, this is unexpected. Welcome to Pinecrest, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Marcus replied, shaking the offered hand. Although it seems our welcome might require some adjustment time. By now, word was spreading quickly among the members. Marion and Diane sat frozen in their lounge chairs, watching as the news rippled to the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Darius, the Johnson son, looked up at his father. "Dad, can we go swimming now?" Marcus glanced at the pool, where several children had stopped their play to stare at the unfolding drama. "In a minute, buddy. Why don't you and Zoe have some fruit first?" Keisha knelt beside her children, keeping her voice low, but deliberate enough that James and Walter could hear. "Remember what we talked about? Some people might need time to get used to seeing us here, but we belong here just as much as anyone else." The children nodded, clearly familiar with these conversations. James cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, perhaps we could discuss your plans with Club privately? The members are naturally curious about what changes might be coming." "Of course," Marcus agreed, "but not today. Today we're just here as a family, enjoying facilities like everyone else." He paused, surveying the scene around them. "And Mr. Richardson, I'd appreciate it if you could remind the staff that my family is to be treated with the same courtesy as any other member." James nodded stiffly. "Absolutely. Please let me know if there's anything you need." As James and Walter retreated, Marcus and Keisha exchanged a knowing look, one that carried the weight of countless similar experiences, the silent understanding of what it meant to navigate spaces not designed for them. Back at their table, Marion and Diane watched in stunned silence as the Johnson children finally made their way to the pool, their initial hesitation giving way to childish delight as they splashed into the water. "Did you know about this?" Diane whispered. Marion shook her head. Richard mentioned the club was being sold, but he said it was to some investment group based in Atlanta. He never said. She trailed off, not completing the thought. Across the lawn, other members were having similar conversations, their Sunday routine disrupted by this unexpected shift in the established order. Some gathered their belongings and left, citing suddenly remembered appointments. Others watched curiously, uncertain how to respond to this new reality. For the Johnson family, this was just the beginning, the first step in a journey that would challenge the club's long-established culture and force its members to confront their own biases. For Pinecrest Country Club, nothing would ever be quite the same again. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds, the divide between the past and future Pinecrest had never been more apparent. The question hanging in the air was whether bridges could be built across that divide, and who would be willing to take the first step. The news of the Johnson family's ownership spread through Pinecrest Country Club like wildfire, igniting conversations in hushed tones around the pool, across tennis courts, and throughout the clubhouse. By Monday morning, the club's members-only social media group had exploded with messages, some expressing outrage, others curiosity, and a few voices calling for calm and respect. For Vanessa Moore, a 35-year-old marketing executive who had inherited her membership from her parents, the weekend's events had struck a different chord. As one of the few members who had advocated for diversity initiatives in the past, she found herself suddenly thrust into the role of mediator between opposing factions. "They have every right to be here," she insisted during an impromptu gathering in the ladies' locker room. "And more importantly, they have the legal authority to implement whatever changes they see fit." "That's precisely what worries me," responded Patricia Whitman, a board member's wife. "My family has been part of Pinecrest for 4 generations. What they decide to, I don't know. Change the dress code or allow loud music by the pool." Vanessa fought the urge to point out that Patricia's own teenage son had been reprimanded multiple times for blasting music from his portable speaker. Instead, she asked gently, "Have they given any indication they plan to make such changes?" Patricia hesitated. "Well, no, but—" "Then perhaps we should reserve judgment," Vanessa suggested. "Mr. Johnson is a successful businessman. He didn't invest in Pinecrest to run it into the ground." Across the club grounds, similar conversations were unfolding. In the men's grill, longtime members debated whether to transfer their memberships to other clubs in the area, while the club staff, many of whom were people of color themselves, watched with a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. Marcus Johnson was well aware of the turmoil his family's presence had created. As he settled into the office that had once belonged to the club's manager, a position now filled by Terrence Williams, an experienced hospitality professional Marcus had brought in from one of his other properties, he reviewed the membership roster with a critical eye. "Terrence, what's your assessment of the situation?" Marcus asked, leaning back in his chair. Terrence, a distinguished man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, consider the question carefully. It's about what we expected. Some immediate resistance, a good deal of uncertainty, and a few potential allies. The staff is cautiously optimistic. They've heard about how you run your other properties. Marcus nodded. And the finances? The club is solvent but stagnant. Membership has declined 15% over the past 5 years. The facilities need updating, and their outreach efforts have been, limited in scope. Limited by design, Marcus noted. Exclusivity has been their selling point for decades. True, Terrence agreed, but exclusivity based on quality and amenities is different from exclusivity based on demographic barriers. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. James Richardson stood in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Johnson, do you have a moment?" "Of course, James. And please call me Marcus." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What can I do for you?" James settled stiffly into the seat. "I wanted to apologize personally for yesterday's misunderstanding. It was not the welcome you and your family deserved." Marcus studied the man before responding. James's discomfort was evident, but whether it stemmed from genuine remorse or simple professional necessity remained unclear. "I appreciate that," Marcus said finally, "but I'm more concerned about ensuring it doesn't happen again, not just to my family, but to anyone who doesn't fit the traditional Pinecrest mold." James shifted in his seat. "That's actually why I'm here. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow evening. They'd like you to attend and address the membership." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "An emergency? Is my ownership considered a crisis, James?" James had the decency to look embarrassed. Poor choice of words. "It's more of an orientation. Members have questions about your vision for the club." "I see. And will Keisha and our children be welcome at this meeting?" The question clearly caught James off guard. "Of course, but these meetings tend to be rather dry. Business matters, you understand." Marcus leaned forward. "Let me be clear, James. My family is not an afterthought in this equation. Keisha is my business partner. She holds an MBA from Wharton and oversees operations for all our properties. And our children represent the future members we hope to cultivate here." James nodded quickly. "Of course. My apologies." After James left, Terrence gave Marcus a knowing look. "That's going to be an interesting meeting." "Indeed," Marcus agreed, "but necessary. Change doesn't happen in comfort zones." That evening, as the Johnsons sat around their dining table in their home a few miles from the club, Keisha pored over financial reports while Marcus helped the children with homework. "How bad is it?" Marcus asked, glancing up from Zoe's math worksheet. Keisha sighed. "Not terrible, but not great. They've been operating on assumptions rather than data for years. The tennis program is actually losing money, while their weekend brunches are significantly underpriced for quality. Any bright spots?" "The junior golf program has potential, and the staff retention is surprisingly good despite the management issues." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "We need to focus on the staff first. They're our best allies in this transition." Darius looked up from his history assignment. "Dad, will those people be nicer to us next time we go to club?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications that no 10-year-old should have to consider. Marcus and Keisha exchanged a look weighted with shared experience. "Some will be, some won't," Marcus answered honestly. "But we don't go places based on how others might treat us, remember?" Darius nodded. "We go because we have the right to be there." "That's right," Keisha affirmed. "And because sometimes being present is how change begins." The following evening, the clubhouse ballroom was filled to capacity. Members who hadn't attended a club function in months had shown up, curious about the new ownership and what it might mean for their beloved institution. Marcus and Keisha Johnson entered the room together. dressed impeccably in business attire, their children at home with sitter. A hush fell over the crowd as they made their way to the front of the room, where the board members sat at a long table. James Richardson called the meeting to order, introducing Marcus with formality that bordered on stiffness. As Marcus took the podium, he surveyed the room, the curious faces, the skeptical frowns, and the few encouraging smiles among a sea of uncertainty. "Good evening," he began. "For those who haven't heard, my name is Marcus Johnson. Along with my wife and business partner, Keisha, we are the new owners of Pinecrest Country Club through our investment group." He paused, letting that information settle once more. "I understand change can be unsettling. You're wondering why we purchased Pinecrest and what we plan to do with it. The simple answer is, we saw potential. Potential in facilities, the location, and yes, in the community." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Some of you may be concerned that we plan to radically alter the character of the club. Let me address that directly. Pinecrest has a proud history spanning nearly 7 decades. We respect a history while recognizing that all institutions must evolve to remain relevant and vibrant." Keisha stepped forward to join him at the podium. "As business owners," she continued seamlessly, "we believe in making decisions based on data and opportunity, not fear or tradition for tradition's sake. Our preliminary review suggests that Pinecrest has been operating below its potential in several key areas." She outlined their initial findings with clarity and confidence, highlighting both strengths to build upon and weaknesses to address. The room grew quieter as she spoke, professional expertise gradually overshadowing the demographic differences that had caused such consternation just days before. "We see tremendous opportunity to grow membership through targeted outreach to diverse professionals in the area," Marcus added, "while enhancing the experience for existing members through facility upgrades and expanded programming." From the middle of the room, an older man raised his hand. Marcus recognized him as Walter Chambers from Sunday's encounter. "Yes, Mr. Chambers?" Marcus acknowledged. "You speak of diversity," Walter said, his voice carrying through the room. "Some of us are concerned that you might attempt to, how shall I put this, change the essential character of Pinecrest. We chose this club for its particular atmosphere." The coded language hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. Marcus met the man's gaze steadily. "If by particular atmosphere you mean exclusivity based on income and professional standing, that will remain. Pinecrest will continue to be a premium club with membership fees that reflect the quality of our facilities and services." He paused deliberately before continuing. "But if your concern is that you'll begin seeing more faces that look like mine and my wife's around the club, then yes, that aspect of Pinecrest's character will indeed change. Not through quotas or mandates, but through equal opportunity and merit-based acceptance." The tension in the room was palpable. Then, from near the back, Vanessa Moore stood up. "I, for one, am excited about this new direction," she said clearly. "Pinecrest has been losing members and relevance for years because we failed to adapt to the changing demographics of our community. I believe the Johnsons bring exactly the fresh perspective we need." A few scattered nods and murmurs of agreement followed her statement, though many remained stone-faced. As the meeting continued, questions ranged from practical concerns about upcoming events to thinly veiled challenges about the Johnsons' qualifications. Marcus and Keisha addressed each with professionalism and occasionally, when warranted, with gentle but firm pushback against underlying assumptions. By the evening's end, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Not everyone was convinced, but the conversation had moved from who belongs here to where do we go from here, a small but crucial first step toward transformation. As members filed out of ballroom, some approached the Johnsons directly. Among them was Marion Taylor, the woman whose whispered, "They don't belong here," had set Sunday's events in motion. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," she said, her voice slightly strained but determined. I should... She paused, collecting herself. "Your presentation was most informative. I'm particularly interested in the renovations you mentioned for the women's locker facilities. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, a tentative bridge across a deep divide. We'd value your input on those plans, Mrs. Taylor," Keisha replied graciously. "Perhaps you could join the facilities committee we're forming?" Surprise flickered across Marion's face, followed by consideration. Yes, I might do that." As the last members departed, Terrence approached with cups of coffee from Marcus and Keisha. "Well, that went better than expected," he observed. "It's a start," Marcus agreed, "but the real work begins tomorrow." And indeed it would. The complex, often uncomfortable work of transformation that reaches far beyond ownership documents and financial statements, into the human heart of community and belonging. 3 months after the Johnsons' first appearance at Pinecrest Country Club, the property had begun a visible metamorphosis. Construction crews worked on modernizing the poolside cabanas. The tennis court sported fresh surfaces, and the clubhouse lobby gleamed with new lighting fixtures that highlighted previously overlooked architectural details. Less visible but equally significant were the changes in the club's atmosphere. The initial shock of black ownership had gradually given way to a new normal, though not without ongoing moments of tension and adjustment. On a warm September Saturday, Keisha Johnson welcomed participants to Pinecrest's first community golf clinic, an initiative that allowed non-members from surrounding neighborhoods to experience the club's championship course while introducing young people to the sport. Golf has traditionally been a game of access, Keisha explained to the assembled group, which included both club members and community participants. Today, we're expanding that access while maintaining the excellence Pinecrest is known for. Among the volunteers was Marion Taylor, whose initial hostility toward the Johnsons had evolved into a complicated respect. As she helped distribute golf caps to the young participants, she found herself alongside Zoe Johnson, who was eagerly assisting with the event. "You're quite the helper," Marion commented, handing Zoe another stack of caps. "Mom says it's important to be part of the community you want to build," the 7-year-old replied matter-of-factly. Marion paused, struck by the wisdom in the child's words. "Your mother sounds very smart." "She is," Zoe agreed cheerfully. "Dad says she's the brains, he's just a money man, but Mom says that's not true." Marion couldn't help but smile at the girl's candor. 3 months ago, she would never have imagined having such a conversation at Pinecrest. The realization was both discomforting and enlightening. Across the practice green, Marcus was deep in conversation with Walter Chambers and several other long-standing members. Their initial antagonism had gradually shifted to grudging cooperation as Marcus demonstrated not only business acumen, but a genuine appreciation for the club's history. "The memorabilia display in the clubhouse is impressive," Marcus was saying, "but it tells an incomplete story. Pinecrest caddies were critical to the club's development, yet they're barely mentioned." Walter frowned. "They were employees, not members." "They were integral to the Pinecrest experience," Marcus countered. "And many were extraordinary golfers who weren't allowed to play these courses themselves." James Richardson, who had maintained a position as club president to the transition, joined the conversation. "What are you proposing, Marcus?" "A more complete historical exhibit," Marcus explained. "One that honors all the people who made Pinecrest what it is. Members, staff, and yes, the caddies who often trained the very members who competed in tournaments." Walter looked skeptical but not dismissive. "I suppose there's no harm in acknowledging that history." "There's actual benefit," Marcus replied. "Authenticity builds stronger communities than selective remembering." The conversation was interrupted by shouts of excitement from the practice area, where a young girl from the community program had just hit a perfect drive under Keisha's guidance. The joy on the child's face as club members applauded her success transcended the invisible boundaries that had defined Pinecrest for decades. Later that afternoon, Vanessa Moore hosted a small gathering at her home for some of the club's younger members and several prospective ones, including 3 families of color who had previously felt unwelcome at Pinecrest despite their professional achievements and financial means. "The Johnsons have managed something remarkable," Vanessa observed as the group enjoyed drinks on her patio. "They've challenged the status quo without alienating everyone invested in it." "Not everyone's happy," noted Michael Zhang, a surgeon whose membership application had been mysteriously delayed multiple times before the change in ownership. "I've heard the grumbling." "True," Vanessa acknowledged. "The Westbrook family transferred their membership to Oak Ridge last month, said they wanted a more traditional club experience." Devin Harris, a tech entrepreneur considering membership, raised an eyebrow. "Traditional being code for—" "Exactly," Vanessa confirmed. But for every Westbrook, we've gained 3 new families who bring fresh energy and perspective. The club feels more vibrant than it has in years. It's not just demographic change, added Catherine Phillips, a long-time member in her 40s. The Johnsons actually listen to members' needs. The new child care service during adult tennis leagues? Game changer for parents. Back at the club, as evening approached, Marcus and Terrence reviewed the day's events in the manager's office. The clinic was a success, Terrence reported. 17 community participants, 6 of whom have already requested membership information. And existing members? Marcus asked. Mixed responses, but predominantly positive. The fact that you maintain the skill level requirements while opening access routes seems to have reassured the old guard. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. It's a balancing act. Change too much too quickly, and we lose the institutional knowledge and traditions worth preserving. Move too slowly, and we miss opportunities to evolve. Speaking of evolution, Terrence said, have you made a decision about Diane Lawson's complaint? Marcus sighed. Diane, one of Marion's closest friends, had filed a formal complaint when one of the newly hired black servers had accidentally spilled water on her designer handbag. Her demand that the server be fired was clearly disproportionate to the offense. I'm meeting with her tomorrow, Marcus replied. Keisha suggested we offer to cover the cleaning costs as a courtesy, but make it clear that we stand behind our staff when accidents happen. She won't be satisfied, Terrence warned. Probably not, Marcus agreed, but it's important that all our members understand our values, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. That evening, the Johnson family gathered in their backyard for a barbecue with friends, including several families they had introduced to Pinecrest. As the adults talked and the children played, Keisha found a moment alone with Marcus. 3 months, she mused, handing him a glass of wine. It feels like 3 years sometimes. Marcus chuckled. The gray hairs sprouting on my temples would agree with you. Worth it, though? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus looked around at their friends, at their children playing freely, at the community they were gradually building. Absolutely. Though I won't pretend it's been easy. The incident last week with Darius, Keisha said quietly, referring to an uncomfortable interaction where their son had been questioned by a member while using the club library alone. We knew there would be moments like that, Marcus reminded her. And we agreed that facing them head-on was better than pretending they don't exist. I know. It's just different when it's your child experiencing it. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. The difference is that unlike countless other families throughout history, we have the power to address it systemically, not just individually. Keisha leaned against him, drawing strength from the truth in his words. The membership numbers? Up 12%, Marcus confirmed. And more diverse than ever, both racially and professionally. The junior programs are at capacity for the first time in a decade. And the resistance? Still there, he acknowledged. The anonymous complaint letters have slowed, but not stopped. Some members still go quiet when we enter a room. But others don't, Keisha pointed out. Like Marion. Who would have predicted she'd become one of our strongest allies? Marcus laughed. Certainly not me, after that first day. Their conversation was interrupted by Zoe and Darius running over. Excited about a diving competition their friends were organizing for the next day at the club pool. Can we go early tomorrow? Darius asked eagerly. Tyler says they're setting up at 10. The easy way he referred to the club, a place where just months ago he felt unwelcome, was perhaps the most meaningful measure of progress. Not complete transformation, not perfect acceptance, but a significant shift toward belonging. The following weekend found Pinecrest hosting its annual fall gala, a black tie event that had traditionally marked the social highlight of the club calendar. In previous years, the event had been an exercise in exclusivity and tradition. Under the Johnsons' guidance, it maintained its elegance while expanding its purpose. The ballroom glittered with autumn-themed decorations as members and special guests mingled. A portion of the ticket proceeds would support a scholarship fund for promising young golfers from underserved communities, an initiative that had initially raised eyebrows but gradually gained support. As Marcus and Keisha circulated among the guests, they were approached by an elderly couple they hadn't met before. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the gentleman said, extending his hand. I'm Howard Miller, and this is my wife, Eleanor. We've been members for over 40 years, though health issues have kept us away recently. It's a pleasure to meet you, Marcus replied warmly. Eleanor Miller, an elegant woman in her 80s, studied Keisha with bright, intelligent eyes. I wanted to come tonight specifically to meet you both. My father was a caddy here in the 1940s. The statement hung in the air, laden with unspoken history. He was never allowed to play the course, she continued. Not once in the 20 years he worked here. When I married Howard and he joined Pinecrest in the 70s, my father wouldn't come to visit us here. Too many memories. Keisha reached out to squeeze the woman's hand. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Eleanor said with surprising firmness. Be proud. What you're doing here matters. My father passed long ago, but I brought something he would want you to have. She handed Marcus an envelope containing a faded photograph of a group of caddies standing behind the clubhouse, their faces serious as they looked into the camera. For your history exhibit, she explained. My father is third from the left. His name was Joseph Taylor. Marcus studied the photograph with reverence. We would be honored to include this in the exhibit, Mrs. Miller, and to hear more about your father's experiences, if you're willing to share them. I am, she confirmed. It's time those stories were told. As the evening progressed, James Richardson tapped his glass for attention and addressed the gathered members. His speech highlighted the club's achievements over the past year, tactfully acknowledging the transition in ownership as a new chapter in Pinecrest's distinguished history. When he introduced Marcus and Keisha to deliver their remarks, the applause was not universal, but substantially warmer than it would have been 3 months earlier. Marcus took the podium, Keisha at his side. Thank you all for being part of this evening, and more importantly, for being part of Pinecrest's journey. He surveyed the room, faces familiar and new, some still wary, others openly supportive, all part of community in evolution. When we purchased this club, many wondered about our motives. Some assumed we intended to dismantle traditions or exact some form of revenge for historical exclusion. A knowing chuckle rippled through parts of the audience. The truth is both simpler and more complex. We believe that institutions like Pinecrest remain valuable not despite becoming more inclusive, but because of it. Excellence doesn't diminish when access expands. It grows stronger, richer, more resilient. Keisha stepped forward to continue. Over these past months, we've learned as much as we've taught. We've discovered traditions worth preserving alongside practices that needed questioning. We found allies in unexpected places and challenges where we least anticipated them. She glanced toward Marion Taylor, who gave a small nod of acknowledgement. This journey continues, Keisha concluded, not as owners and members, but as partners in something larger than ownership, a community striving toward its best possible future. Later that night, as they drove home with their sleepy children in the back seat, Marcus and Keisha reflected on the evening. Eleanor Miller's photograph, Marcus said quietly. That moment felt like closing a circle somehow. Or opening a new one, Keisha suggested. Those stories becoming part of the acknowledged history rather than the hidden one. They drove in comfortable silence for a few moments before Zoe's voice came from the back seat. Mom, Dad, are we going to own the club forever? Marcus glanced at his daughter in the rear-view mirror. Nothing is forever, sweetheart, but we're just getting started. Good, she mumbled sleepily, because I'm going to be the club's swimming champion next summer. The simple confidence in her voice, the absence of doubt about her place or belonging, was perhaps the most profound measure of the transformation underway, not just of a country club, but of expectations, possibilities, and the subtle, powerful shift that occurs when presence becomes belonging and ownership extends beyond property to include the future itself. As they pulled into their driveway, the first stars appeared in the evening sky, constants in a changing landscape, much like the truth that had guided the Johnsons through these challenging months. That lasting change comes not from force, but from persistence, not from rejection, but from engagement, and ultimately, from the courage to remain present even when others insist you don't belong.